Okay, we're back on the record, so
County, that works. Thank you. The county calls Director Reckenwald.
good morning, sir. Not like we don't know, but would you read state your name for the record, please?
Yes, George Rectenwald,
Mr. Reckenwald, where are you employed?
County of Volusia.
How long have you been employed with Volusia County?
See, going on 16 years.
What is your present position?
Director of Public Protection.
How long have you been in the position of the Director of Public Protection?
2 years.
Prior to this position, what positions did you hold with Volusia County?
Director of Public Works. Also filled in as the Director of the Ocean Center. Before that, the Director of Road and Bridges.
So you, in your career with Volusia County, would you say that you had significant management experience?
Yes.
And prior to working at the Department of Public Protection, were you involved in disciplinary actions of employees with Volusia County?
Yes.
I want to direct your attention to the case that we're hearing today, Mr. Nathan Schneider. Were you made aware in November 2012 that Charles Sella had made allegations against Captain Nina Hunter?
Yes, I was.
And were you told what the nature of those allegations were?
Yes.
What did you do in response to that?
Immediately ordered an internal affairs investigation.
Why did you do that?
It's a serious charge. The charge from Mr. Sella was that his captain, had, among other things, licked him in the head and had done other vulgar acts, and it involved, a high-ranking person at the facility who was in charge, and take that very seriously.
Just for the board's understanding, within the Department of Corrections, is the position of captain one of the higher ranks in the organization?
Yes, it is.
And how, if you recall, had Captain Hunter been with the agency for a number of years?
Yes, he has.
Did you consider Officer Sella's allegations to be sexual harassment as
Yes.
you would define it?
I thought, there was definitely that element.
Did you ask, or did you direct Captain Vance to conduct an internal investigation?
Yes.
At some point during the course of the Hunter internal investigation, did Captain Vance tell you about an issue that had arisen with one of the witnesses, Nathan Schneider's testimony?
Yes, he did.
Was it your understanding at that time that Mr. Schneider was a witness or a potential witness in the Hunter investigation?
Yes.
So from that perspective, if he was an eyewitness to some, the actions of Captain Hunter, whether it was proven to be truthful or not, the allegations of Sella, was he an important witness potentially?
Yes, he definitely, he was placed in the room, so he was definitely an important witness.
What was the general nature of what Captain Mann told you was the problem with Mr. Schneider's first two interviews?
But they were totally inconsistent, that he had come in and that he had basically, said that he didn't see it, and then he came in and said that he did see it.
Was it significant to you what the fact was that he changed his story on? In other words, it wasn't that she was wearing green that day, but, oh, I'm sorry, she was wearing blue.
Right, no, it was the fact that it had changed, it was inconsistent, and now we had an issue.
Yeah, and what I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear on that question. The information itself, whether or not Captain Hunter had licked the back of a subordinate officer's head, was that material and very important information to the
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of the crux to the Sella case, the Sella Hunter case. Is, did it happen or did it not? It's the whole kind of the centerpiece of the case.
Right. So it wasn't that Mr. Schneider had changed his testimony about something insignificant. It was in part because it was a very important fact in the alleged fact. Correct? Okay. Now, when Captain Mann is conducting an internal investigation, you aren't involved in that, are you?
That's correct.
At the conclusion of the Schneider investigation, were you briefed by Captain Madison, did you also receive a copy of his report of investigation that he talked about earlier?
Yes,
Did you also, after reviewing that, I assume you reviewed the report of investigation,
yes, I did.
did you review the sworn testimony of Mr. Schneider?
I did.
So you didn't just rely on what Captain Madison told you or what was in, okay, okay. When you reviewed those three statements, if you had found that the statements, the second statement where he came in and said, I did see it, I did see the licking, and the third statement that he gave under oath, if you had found those to be consistent, how would you have treated the situation?
Well, then it would have been more of a clarification, and that's, I think it would have been more, I think what the opening statement, was Thompson said, then we would have probably had more of a situation of a poor witness. And what we were looking at was a clarification at that point.
So what, so to
But
be.
when he changed from 2 to 3, one to 2 is the poor witness, to 2 to 3, because he goes back to what he said in 1. Well, now in the totality of the testimony, it's now, you know, I can't get really any truth out of it. So
I mean, do you know, as you sit here today, which of his statements was true?
no, I don't. I mean, that's the, you know, the position I'm in.
Does a sworn correctional officer have a duty to report unusual incidents?
Yes, that's actually a major part of their job. I mean, when they're out there, they keep logs of, they have unit logs, they have inmate logs on various people. You know, the whole idea of a correctional officer, of course, you've got people in their care and confinement, and they need to be reporting on that at all times. So keep record keeping, truthfulness, and everything is very important out there because of, you know, it's a huge responsibility that we have, that they have. So when there's something unusual out there, I mean, they're supposed to be reporting. I mean, they report usual. I mean, you know, a lot of their logs just, they are very, you know, just inmates are sleeping, inmates are awake. I mean, there's a lot of things, you know, that are out there that are just, you know, common anyway, but certainly things that get, you know, of an unusual nature should be reported and brought out to the supervisors.
You were here and heard the testimony of Captain Vanis and the questions regarding the allegation that Captain Hunter regularly engages in some of the behavior that, or that's the allegation at this point, or what's being said now is that that's not out of the ordinary for her. What stood out to you with regards to that testimony in terms of, you know, the distinction between whether she regularly uses bad language or flatulates on people versus the allegation that she licked the back of a subordinate officer's head?
Well, in the case of looking, you know, she's been, you know, at that point crossed over and, you know, I think touched someone in an improper manner, and so that's another whole level. I don't like the other part of it either, but certainly, you know, when you go to improperly touch someone in that manner, I think you've gone into a harassment situation.
And just to be clear, prior to the investigation of Captain Hunter, based on the allegations of Mr. Seller, are you aware that anyone in the Department of Corrections had ever brought to anyone's attention that she regularly did things like speak bad language, pass gas on people, or any of the other things that you were now being told, oh, that's regular occurrence for her?
Right, that's the first I've ever heard of that.
So it isn't a situation where management had allowed her to have this bad behavior for years and years with knowledge. What, can you give us maybe an example or not specific factual example, but why is it important for, you talked about corrections officers having the care and custody of inmates, why is it important for them to be truthful and for their veracity to be without question?
Well, there's lots of incidents, but, you know, one, first of all, is that inmates constantly accuse us of things, you know, so we're under that kind of scrutiny at all times. You have an officer who, they have tremendous responsibility, they do a tremendous job out there, and they're often, you know, you're talking, you know, several inmates, many inmates to one or two people. So you've got multiple words against one or two, so it's very important that they remain honest at all times. We get into incidents where people are injured, people are taken down, you know, believe it or not, people misbehave in a jail, and they have to take that responsibility, and sometimes they have to use force, sometimes they have to use things that can result in injury. Sometimes the inmates injure themselves, and, you know, and again, I don't want to make any light. These guys have and women have a very tough job in there. But it's very important that they stay honest at all times and tell the truth, because, you know, they're going to get a lot of questions back at them, a lot of accusations, and we want to be able to successfully defend them.
For example, what would happen if an inmate made an allegation against Mr. Schneider that he used excessive force against him? That Schneider had used excessive force against an inmate?
Well, the potential, you know, there would be an investigation, and there's a potential for a lawsuit, an action, and he would have to testify to that.
So is it your testimony that if he has an allegation or a sustained violation of a veracity issue, that could or would compromise his testimony in any future?
It could, very much so.
Do you expect when an officer is writing a report or giving a witness statement or testifying in court for that matter, do you expect them to be truthful?
Yes.
And do you expect them to answer questions only if the right question is asked?
No, I think that an officer, especially, these are situations, you got an 11-year veteran who's been out there. I think there's an affirmative duty of people who are sworn officers to be above that. They need to, if they're asked a narrow question and they know that didn't hit on the point, then they need to expand that answer to get to the truth. They're duty bound, they take an oath to be truthful and to protect and serve. And, you know, if the question's too narrow, I think that they have a duty to expand on that.
To be perfectly clear, in this case, had Officer Schneider seen Captain Hunter lick Officer Sellishead and just testified to that in the first interview, yep, I saw it, that's what she did, would he have been in any trouble at that point?
No, he was a witness. At that point, he was just a witness.
I'm going to direct you back now to the investigation. After reviewing the report of investigation and the statements and satisfying yourself as to the evidence and the facts against Mr. Schneider, did you reach a conclusion did you agree with Captain Vance's conclusion that certain merit rules and department policies have been violated?
Yes, I did.
And did you then decide to make a decision as to what would be the appropriate discipline for the violation of those rules?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell the board, what did you consider when you were looking at what would be the appropriate discipline for Mr. Schneider in this case?
Well, first off, I looked at consistency across, you know, the department, and we have terminated employees for lying, for veracity issues, falsifying documents. It's a serious offense, and so that's where we get to the firing. I also weighed, I did look at his record. He has a few things in there. There's an insubordination. There were some other instances that were in his record. On top of that, and then of course, you know, the decisions made after we weigh the interest of the county and the corrections division versus his interest. We have a lot of investment in this individual, 11 years plus training. So it's not something that I certainly take lightly or want to do. But in the end, because of the liability factor, that he's now a person that, you know, on record You know, is not telling a straight story, is just being untruthful. You know, with the amount of inmates and the people he goes through there and what his job entails, I didn't see how he could function anymore in that position.
You mentioned just a little bit, and without getting into specifics of the instances, prior discipline with him, nothing major, I understand. Could you explain for the board a little bit about progressive discipline and how in some cases progressive discipline is not applicable?
Yeah, there are certain things, and untruthfulness, lying is one of them, certain assault, stealing. There are certain actions that an employee takes that, you know, takes us to, they're egregious, and they go to, you know, termination is considered.
And I believe you said you did take into account, you reviewed his personnel file, so you were aware of his history with the organization.
Yes,
But ultimately, you felt termination was the appropriate penalty?
yes, I do.
And did you issue a notice of intent to terminate?
Yes, I do.
Subsequently, did you meet with Mr. Schneider
Yes,
to
I
allow
did.
him the opportunity to give you any defenses or mitigation?
Yes,
Did he provide you with any mitigation or explanation or circumstances that allowed you to come to a different conclusion as to the appropriate penalty?
no, no, he did not. You know, he, I think, is sincere in the fact that he, you know, was upset of the situation, but I think he was even inconsistent in discussing, you know, the events with me in that meeting.
Did you come to the conclusion at the end of that meeting that you still didn't feel?
Yeah, he didn't bring anything that could convince me that termination was not the correct.
This board is required to consider consistency and discipline ultimately when they render their decision. And you talked a little bit about consistency. Have you personally ever terminated an employee in the Department of Public Protection for lying either under oath or lying to a supervisor?
Yes, I have.
And when you mentioned a prior experience with Road and Bridge, it would be helpful to the board to understand sort of the difference between a Road and Bridge employee lying to a supervisor versus a corrections officer.
Well, it's all serious. I mean, but there might be some positions in county government, if I suppose if you're out in on a work site, that the likelihood of you being involved in a legal proceeding or you know, we're really, I hate to say it, but maybe you're paid more for your physical action than you are for anything, you know, else, I suppose. It could be, you know, and then I guess it would depend, you know, I mean, are they something about, something minor versus, you know, something integral to a lawsuit, you know, I think would be, be the same trouble. They were under some sort of an active investigation and were part of, and they gave false testimony, and that it would be, I think, just a serious trouble.
Was it significant to you that the testimony or the statements made by Mr. Schneider were under oath, and he had sworn to tell the truth, and then he didn't tell the truth, obviously,
Well,
in this case?
you know, I think he has to tell the truth in his line of work all the time. You know, I think he has to tell it to a supervisor, he has to tell it to the investigator.
And just to make sure I understood what you're saying about the distinction between, say, someone working out in the road and bridge capacity versus in a law enforcement or corrections officer capacity, your road and bridge employees are not going to be called to testify in court regularly, are they?
No, I mean, it would be extremely rare.
Did you feel that Officer Schneider's actions in this case, his untruthfulness, had an impact on the, not did you feel, did his untruthfulness have an impact on the conclusion in the Hunter internal investigation?
It absolutely did.
How so?
Well, I could not use them He was one of the witnesses, one of the key witnesses in the room. So, I could not use it because it was not consistent at all.
So ultimately, were you able to sustain the allegations against Captain Hunter about the licking and the actions on August the 4th?
No, I could not,
Why not?
because I had no witnesses. I had only the word of one person versus the word of another.
That's all I have to say.
Director Wald, we're using the word truthfulness a lot. Do you see a difference between truthfulness and inaccuracy?
In general, yes.
What about truthfulness and, as being different from an incompleteness?
Well, I think my mom used to say, there's the lying by omission thing, so I would say that's a fine line there. I think they say, they tell the whole truth. So by cutting something off, that could be a problem.
Would you agree that there's an element of intent that drives truthfulness?
Probably.
So someone can be wrong, inaccurate, incomplete, but also truthful.
Yes.
Okay. You talked a little bit about the importance of, obviously, corrections officers testifying. And isn't it true that one of the ways that we ensure that their memories are as fresh as possible is that they actually make reports as close to the event as possible?
It's true.
Okay. And the reason that that happens is because, as everyone knows, over time, your memory fades,
Correct.
changes. Okay. So, and before an officer goes into court, maybe even before you came here today, you look over your documents. Before you give testimony, you get your memory refreshed.
Yes.
In this particular instance, Officer Schneider, it had been 109 days since the events for which he was being asked to provide very specific answers to.
Yes.
Okay. If you were asked today, specifically where you were on Flag Day, which was roughly 109 days ago.
On what day again?
Flag Day,
Okay.
would you be able to come up with some very specific answers if I generally asked you where you were, what you were doing, if you saw anything unusual that day?
Yeah, if I saw something unusual, I would remember it.
And in the course of this investigation, for which you've read many transcripts, many more than even just Officer Schneider, is it fair to say that you've come to an understanding that the events that were witnessed were in fact not unusual at all?
I wouldn't say that I've come to that conclusion. I mean, I have some people saying that, but I don't necessarily have proof that that's the truth.
How many people would it take?
It would take several because, I've also been around long enough to know that, and this is what's important, I mean, they're out in a situation and we're not here, it's not about Captain Hunter or anything, but having supervised people a lot of my life and everything, it's not necessarily that unusual to have some people who don't like a supervisor say, oh, they use foul language and they do this and do that. A lot of it depends on, the relationship they have. It's interesting over time too, is what's acceptable some days, and then all of a sudden they're told something that maybe is unpopular that they don't want to do, and all of a sudden now that behavior, maybe it's different, the way they interpret it or read it. So I'm not sure I have, you know, I could not say that that's the way that all behavior is out there.
Okay. So it's fair to say that you're interested in the truth?
That's correct.
Okay. And is it fair to say that memory, a truthful memory, sometimes is a process?
Okay.
So, if the truth is what we're after, and in this instance, Officer Schneider voluntarily realizes that his first answers were not complete, is it your preference that he should have stayed quiet?
No. No, I think, if it's not complete, he does the right thing by coming back.
Comes back in to complete the answer, which is what he does the second time around.
Yeah, I think he changes the answer the second time around as much as completes them.
Well, prior to issuing the notice of intent to dismiss, did you physically listen to the audio recordings?
No, I did not.
When you heard them this morning, in listening to Officer Schneider and how he answers the questions, the amount of indecisiveness, pauses, those types of things that are going on, were you left with an impression after the first interview that Officer Schneider was committed to what he remembered?
I guess in listening to it, I guess I would not use the term committed.
When he comes back 33 minutes later, and even in that second interview, after listening to it, and the way that he answers, I'm pretty sure, like the head, those types of answers, by and large, over the course of the entire conversation, were you at the end of that second interview convinced that he is a witness who knows exactly what he saw or heard?
I think by then, what I think is that he probably knew what he saw. In the first one, he was not sure should he say everything, because I don't know what his relationship is to people. Because he's now being put in, he's in a situation where I don't know if he's friends with Sella, friends with Hunter, but he knows now he's gonna have to say something. He's being ordered to say something. He don't like being in that position. So the first time he kind of hedges, and the second time, after he thinks about it, I think he does start realizing, you know what, I saw it. And that's why he went back in there realizing this is important. And probably at the end of the second time, we're getting pretty close to what happened. So like I said, I think, at that point, well, maybe he's not the best witness because he's changed, he is, I don't know, he candid, but he's clarified. I probably would consider it a clarification at that point. But we do now have some conflict in there that we have to make sure, well, which one is it? Which way is it? And that's where we're at the end of 2.
Right. So just to be clear, was your answer there implying collusion between Officer Schneider and?
Oh, not necessarily. I don't think there's any collusion, but I think he's put in a horrible spot.
Okay. On that same vein, in the first interview, Officer Schneider readily answers as to the conduct of the superior officer, the inappropriate conduct. So it sounds like you're saying he was afraid to provide information or was hesitant to provide information because of potentially some collusion with some other officers, and yet he's very forthcoming to his own detriment, possibly, to report inappropriate behavior that everybody knows about of a superior officer.
You need to repeat that again, I'm not sure I followed you.
It sounded like in your previous answer, you were stating that Officer Schneider was hesitant to provide information because of potentially a collusion-type relationship that he had some interest.
You use collusion, I think that when people work together for a long time, and they do, 11 years, he's been out there, Wes has been out there in that neighborhood, Hunter's been out there longer than that. I think there's a reluctance, there's this incident that's occurred, and you call it collusion, I would just say there's friendships, relationships, and now he's stuck between two of them, because these two have had a happen between Sella and Hunter, and now he's got to tell the truth. So not only he likes being in that position.
Do you think that he similarly likes being put in a
No.
position where he's reporting
He probably doesn't.
inappropriate behavior of a supervisor?
He probably doesn't.
You spoke a little bit about that there is consistency in regards to discipline that is given for falsifying documents of mine. Are you aware of Captain Hunter herself? In May of last year, or May of 2011. That in order to not get in trouble for horseplay, when she brought boxing gloves to the jail and struck another officer in the genitals, and that officer needed medical attention, that Captain Hunter falsified the report to make it as if it was an accident. In fact, she wrote it up and said that I leaned down to pick up a piece of paper and that's how the contact accidentally happened. That Captain Hunter, as captain, wrote up that false report, had the other officer sign it, and it wasn't until that officer comes back and is so guilt-ridden that he has signed a false report that it's uncovered that Captain Hunter has done this. And are you aware of that situation?
No.
Okay. That situation resulted in...
I'm aware that of a boxing glove incident, but the incident occurred before I was the director over there.
Would you be shocked to know that that incident resulted in only a written reprimand?
I don't know if I'd be shocked. I mean, I've got to go by what you just said there. I don't have to investigate the case more myself to know the circumstances.
More recently, just a few months ago, so would have been, I guess, during your tenure, there is an officer, Officer Isaac, who, basic facts are, he's alerted by other inmates that there was another inmate who may have suicidal thoughts. And there's a course, a procedure that's in place for that, where this particular officer is supposed to pull that inmate out, make a report, send him to medic, do all these things. That officer does not follow that procedure. That inmate ends up actually attempting suicide. And the officer initially reports that he didn't follow procedure. And then when a notice of intent to suspend is issued, he changes his story, he and his partner. And they state that they did in fact report it to their supervisor. Well, the supervisor has maintained that he was never notified. And as of today's date, as far as I can tell from the paperwork that's available, there's been no disciplinary action taken against those officers who are telling falsehoods?
Well, I would have to have the opportunity to review, because unfortunately, it's a sad state to say that with over 900 employees in my area, I've got dozens of disciplinary actions in various forms in states right now. And I think, and I don't wanna, because I can't really answer, but that one may be, in its process. And there may have even been one of the officers that have left the county, I don't know. Sitting up here today, I can't answer that.
Okay. You talked about that because of Nathan Schneider's testimony, essentially he can't be used as a witness, is what you said. I think.
In the seller case.
In the Sella case. And the Sella case isn't currently an actual litigation as far as it sits today?
I'm sorry, which question?
Is it, it's an actual litigation? It's been filed?
A lawsuit has not yet been filed now.
Okay. But the claim that was submitted certainly includes the events of August 4th, but it also, more broadly, includes all sorts of behavior that has been going on,
That's correct.
okay, in regards to Captain Hunter. And would it be, do you agree that sexual harassment does not require physical contact?
That's correct.
So, while there is this very specific incident that occurred, may have occurred, on August 4th, Nathan Schneider's testimony doesn't impact the entire investigation.
That's correct.
How many other officers were interviewed in regards to Captain Hunter's investigation?
Well, off the top of my head, I would have to say there was 2 or 3 others that were interviewed.
It's a total of 5. So out of the allegation that a particular captain has engaged in an ongoing course of conduct, a thorough investigation is 5 officers.
It's whatever that the IA investigator believes it is.
And the IA investigator has been in that position for 1.5 years.
2 years, yeah.
You reviewed the personnel file of Officer Schneider, found that there were just, over the course of 3 years, 3 letters of reprimand. And the most recent was back in 2007. So he's had no instances of issues of any kind for 6 years.
Yes.
And his did you also review the evaluations, the annual evaluations?
Yes.
All annual evaluations, that's 11, he has scored in the exceeds expectations category. The most recent evaluation for 2011 includes remarks that he performs tasks with a high degree of accuracy. He is able to organize events in a logical sequence and include all necessary elements. So in a normal,
That's what makes it so difficult for me.
does it then make more sense that Nathan Schneider was asked to recall events on the spot, for which he had difficulty doing, and his subsequent attempts to clarify and make more accurate are the reason he sits here today?
I don't agree with that. I think the first attempt, I might be able to get there, but everything after that, no.
So if he had not come back, if he had left the record, even knowing it was incomplete, Officer Schneider would still be employed today.
I don't know that for a fact, because I mean, and also in the course of other investigations, we also have another officer in the investigation that says something different. So, I don't know how much farther we may have had to keep digging at another point. As as was pointed out to him, and I think when he started thinking that he better go think a little harder about it, was there already was somebody that was saying something, that something had happened. And so, you know, that's part of the problem, is now it's swept so many times, I don't know what to think was gonna come out of his mouth. You know, I don't know, I can't really say.
Well, it's good that you brought that up because, I mean, Officer Schneider was there as a witness. He was not under investigation. And yet he is quite offensively put on notice that his answers are gonna be compared to other people, right? Within moments of sitting down. If you've reviewed.
I don't know if it's offensively, I think if anything, it's a benefit.
You don't think that's an offensive move by Captain Vanis, which puts Officer Schneider in a defensive position?
I think it's a clear indication you better tell the truth, because, you know, as other people are giving the story. I mean, that's, if anything, I think a warning, you know, a help to him, you know.
Did you review all of the transcripts from the different interviews?
At the time, yes, but I had not reviewed them all since then.
Did you ever in any other interview read or hear Captain Vanis say that same statement or anything similar to any other witness?
Not that I recall.
Nathan Schneider's interview, the first interview, first and second, all occurred on November 20th, 2012. And yet his internal affairs case was not open until January 9th of 2013. Why such the lapse of time?
Well, my guess is that we were going into the holidays. We've had other, Captain Vanis also has other duties he has to do. He has to take care of background checks. So I think it was a matter of workload that we opened it when, you know, the opportunity was there to go ahead and finish it off.
At the time, the open investigation into Captain Hunter, would you agree is an important matter? There's a significant potential amount of exposure that the county would face if in fact all or.
I handle a lot of important matters every day, a lot of them. So, I mean, I'm not gonna go back and say, or second guess the timing of when I chose to do something at that time. So, yeah, they're all important.
Okay, were other interviews taking place at that time?
There may be other interviews, we have literally life and death type things we handle, the evac and fire and other areas that I'm also responsible for.
I don't have any further questions.
Just briefly. When you were just asked about the comment that Captain Vanis made when he told Schneider, I've already taken other statements, and you said you thought it was actually a benefit to him. Did you interpret that to be that Captain Vanis was trying to let him know, look, before you go down a road you don't want to go down?
That's exactly what I interpreted it as.
Based on the comments that were
And
read.
we're trying to get the truth, you know, I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble, I just need the truth, because I have to figure out what's going on.
Nobody was trying to trick him or put him into a defensive posture. Based on the comments that were read to you from Mr. Schneider's last evaluation about his accuracy and his thoroughness, would you have expected him to be a little bit more clear in his first interview and thorough and forthcoming when he was asked the questions about what he had seen on August the 4th?
Yes.
You were asked about whether you would have remembered what you did on Flag Day by Ms. Thompson. If you had seen your supervisor lick the back of a subordinate's head, is that something you might remember,
Yes.
no matter how long ago it was?
Yes.
And with regards to the other conduct that's been discussed, that Captain Hunter may have engaged in or was accused by Sala to have engaged in, would you agree that the most serious allegations of in this case were impacted by the lack of veracity and the untruthfulness of Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Just one follow-up, or one or two. Did you also review the testimony of Officer Plotz?
Yes.
Officer Plotz was not present at the time of the August 4th incident.
He was named as someone who'd seen Hunter acting inappropriately, but I don't believe he was there on the 4th. I would have to look that up now and find out.
Without reading Officer Plotz and the substance, because it's very graphic, if you recall. That testimony, in addition to Nathan Schneider's testimony, and Wes' testimony, that didn't provide a basis for you to believe that even if you could not substantiate, even though I disagree with that, but even if you could not substantiate the lick, that overall, there is a pattern of conduct for which certainly Nathan Schneider is being asked to be honest about, and he does.
I don't think he was honest. I mean, I don't agree with that statement. I mean, I guess he changed his story back and forth, so he was not honest about it. Do I think it may have occurred? All I know now is the statement of him and the statement of West, statement of Plotz, and two of them changed your story.
Okay, and just to wrap up, you consider the totality of what Nathan Schneider, the 3 interviews, and the veracity of what he states, and actually the lack of veracity is probably the better way to state that. You consider him to be, in those sworn statements, to be lying.
Yeah.
He lied because when he was first asked, he said, I didn't see it, I would have told you if I saw licking, because I would have remembered that. Then the second interview, he said, you know what, I did see her lick him. Not equivocal, I did see it. And then the third interview back to, I didn't see her lick him.
I didn't see it, right.
And in your mind, that's lying.
That's lying.
Thank you.
Any questions from board members? Thank you for your testimony. Thank you.
Roll call, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, sir. I don't remember if you raised your hand over this morning or not.
Yes, I did.
It's been a while, but okay, I remind you that. Would you state your name to the record, please, sir?
Tom Moses,
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rhodes. What is your present occupation
Human Resources Director,
for the county of Volusia?
County of Volusia.
How long have you been in that capacity?
November will be 6 years.
And prior to coming to Volusia County, did you have experience in human resources?
Yes, I did.
About how many years would you say?
Probably about 15. Prior to that, I had experience in labor relations.
As the Director of Human Resources for Volusia County, are you required to review all proposed adverse disciplinary action?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell the board what adverse disciplinary action is, generally?
It's usually suspensions, taking of money, terminations, those type of things.
And is it, the requirement that you do that, is that part of the Volusia County Merit Rules and Regulations?
Yes, it is.
And what is your role in reviewing all the adverse disciplinary action that's proposed to be taken?
I look to see, one, are they consistent across the organization? I Also, are they violations of the rules?
So you look at whether the evidence and the facts support the violations of the rules that are being sustained, as well as whether the action that is proposed is consistent with others across Volusia County, other employees.
Yes, I do.
And is the consistency required by the Volusia County Merit Rules and Regulations?
Yes.
In other words, fairness in applying discipline, okay. In your experience as the HR director for Volusia County, have there been other county employees whose cases you have reviewed that have been terminated for knowingly giving false statements to supervisors?
Yes, sir, I have.
And do you have, without going into specifics, of specific cases, do you have approximate number of cases that has occurred in? And I'm talking about not just giving sworn testimony, false sworn testimony, but knowingly giving false statements to supervisors or other officials.
Yes, I actually looked this up for another case recently, and since I've been here, I've been involved in 33.
And in those cases, were the employees terminated for making false statements to supervisors?
Yes, they were.
Have you also been involved, or are you aware of cases where employees have been terminated for making false reports or giving falsehoods in official reports?
Yes, I have.
And is that number included in that 33 that you gave me already?
That's better.
That's all I have at this time, thank you.
And I'm sorry, earlier when I discussed the specific, incidents regarding, Captain Hunter, who, filed a false report, drafted it up actually for,
I'm just gonna make an objection for the record as to the facts in this case. I haven't been provided with anything, and would object to her testifying what the facts are and what Captain Hunter was found. Do you have a copy for Mr. Moses?
If I may, as a non-attorney, when I get these objections, sometimes I want some clarification